Tonight on The Story, stolen cars are nothing new in Portland. On average, someone's ride is taken every 48 minutes.
Still westbound at about 93rd.
So what are Portland police doing about it? They've teamed up with an unlikely partner.
It seems like an unusual relationship.
Absolutely. I think the connection is data.
Investigative reporter Kyla Boshi tells us how cops and cancer doctors are working together to slow down the record number of car thefts in the Rose City.
It's driving through oncoming lanes, blue the red light.
Here's The Story.
9900, I'm with him.
It's 4:44 on a Friday afternoon, and Portland police officers from East Precinct are conducting a stolen vehicle operation. Their mission? Track down stolen cars and arrest those responsible. And to help do so, these officers are relying on data science in the same way sports teams use analytics and companies optimize performance. Erica Hurley is commander at East Precinct.
It's a process, and that's what we're learning here, is how to use our data in a process that helps us do better work with less resources.
Now, before we explain the process, let's talk about the problem. In recent years, the city of Portland has seen a record number of stolen cars. On average, a vehicle is stolen every 48 minutes in Portland. Not only does that stolen car create a real headache for the owner, but Officer Jose Jimenez admits
they lead to other crimes.
These stolen vehicles are often used to commit crimes like murders, shootings, and armed robberies. Adding to the problem,
902, I got him. Through the intersection, almost T-boned.
the bad guys often elude police. They know Portland Police Bureau policy prohibits officers from chasing stolen vehicles.
Coming up on a stale green. Through the intersection, just collided.
So to help tackle this growing problem, East Precinct created the Stolen Vehicle Operation in November of 2021. The idea was to flood an area with police along with an airplane above to make traffic stops and arrests. And to some degree, it worked. But officers knew there had to be a better way, so they turned to the data. The idea was to find out how veteran officers identified stolen vehicles, then translate that into a formula that could help others working these special missions. Officers started tracking elements that were present on every stop of a stolen vehicle. In all, nearly 100 factors were put into a database and analyzed. These included physical characteristics of the vehicle and vehicle driving behavior, and importantly, nothing about the driver's racial profile. These elements are called enrichment factors, essentially hallmarks of a stolen vehicle. For example, a missing license plate, a broken window, no lights, and abnormal lane changes. As the theory goes, the more enrichment factors, the more likely it's a stolen car, which in practice seemed to make sense.
So when we look at a vehicle like this, you look at the fact that there's no plates on the vehicle, you look at the fact that there's a trip permit that may not come back to this vehicle. Their driving was erratic, it was inappropriate, so that's also another factor that made them realize it. And then when they tried to initiate a traffic stop on it, it ran, it eluded. Right. And so, stolen car.
And it all kind of adds up.
Correct. And then the driver also has a warrant for his arrest.
To better understand the data, Portland police turned to an unlikely partner. Researchers at the OHSU Knight Cancer Institute. It seems like an unusual relationship.
Absolutely. I think the connection is data. The police are collecting and using data to make their process more precise and more efficient. That's exactly the same thing we do here in cancer research.
Dr. Jeff Tyner, along with a team of scientists who specialize in large data sets, helped Portland Police to fine-tune its analysis of suspected stolen vehicles. There were meetings, scientific presentations, and even a ride-along for the cancer researcher.
I think we offered them some advice on best practices for data collection, offered them advice on some ways they might think about analyzing the data that might not have occurred to them initially.
After almost a year in practice, the data science appears to be helping officers work more effectively. Previously, police officers at East Precinct recovered one stolen vehicle for every 31 stops. Now, they're recovering one stolen vehicle for every 5 stops. Sergeant Steve Wilbon.
We're being asked to do more, better with less, and working smarter and using some of these methodologies are really producing the best product.
The bike, off the bike, running southbound through the cul-de-sac.
And in many cases, a stop leads to more than just the recovery of a stolen vehicle.
Let's get some cars south of here.
On this night, a suspect dumped his stolen motorcycle, tossed a loaded gun, and then ran through a neighborhood. He had a felony warrant for his arrest after allegedly stealing another vehicle last summer. Officers at Portland's East Precinct hope that data science can help break this cycle of stolen vehicles and lead to new ways of policing in the future.
Kyle, super interesting story. I'm so glad those doctors are helping out with the stolen cars. But I thought it was illegal for police to pull people over for just like a missing brake light.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're not talking about a minor traffic infraction here. Police have the justification to make that stop in the first place. But again, they're not looking for one thing. They're looking for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 enrichment factors. The point being, they're looking for a stolen vehicle, and the odds go way up when there are a lot of those factors in play.
What are some of those factors?
So they told us, but they don't want us to tell that to the public. For good reason. They don't want the bad guys to know. Oftentimes, they may alter a stolen vehicle so it can't be detected.
And they think that the bad guys are watching our show every night.
You never know.
It's possible.
You never know.
All right. And then where does it go from here?
Right. So they're very proud of the program, and they think it can go beyond East Precinct, where it's focused on now, maybe elsewhere in the Bureau, other police agencies as well. They're also using some of this same data collection and information in retail theft missions as well.
Wow, fascinating. All right. Thanks for bringing us that, Kyle. Appreciate it. Now we want to hear what you think about all this. Send us an email to thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, will you? 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. Now to a particularly sad story. According to the Oregon Health Authority, 522 people died homeless in Oregon in 2022. Now, when someone dies that way, it can be challenging to learn much about them. They've sort of dropped off the grid. And that is what happened to a man who died in Bend this last January. But he did have a history, and he did have a story. In fact, he'd been the mayor of Bend. Before his death, Bend Bulletin reporter Bryce Dole met him at an emergency shelter.
Right around Christmas, I was reporting in a shelter about people who were taking shelter from the conditions. And I just bumped into this guy, and he said, hey, I was actually the mayor. And he had been living in that shelter for a few months at that point.
The man he ran into was named Craig Coiner III. He was indeed the mayor of Bend in 1984. He served on the city council for more than a decade. Bryce Dole's article about him is worth your time. Dole talked to Coiner's family and friends to find out how a man who was once so connected, so powerful, ended up dying homeless. Coiner was a Marine Corps vet who served stateside during the Vietnam War. He grew up in Bend. He came from a prominent family in Central Oregon.
Craig Coiner III was a city councilor here in Bend for about 12 years. He was also the mayor for a year. He was a defense attorney and a prosecutor for decades. He's somebody who was heavily involved in this community. The Coiner family is fairly well known in Deschutes County. They were pretty involved in the development and ownership of a lot of the buildings around town. There still are, there's 2 avenues in Redmond that are named after them called Coiner Avenue. There's a point, kind of a prominent place near downtown Bend that was known as Coiner Point for a very long time. And there's also a trail that's still here called Coiner Trail. So basically, if you're a longtime local in Bend, you likely know, or a lot of folks do know, the Coiner family.
And throughout his life, the one-time mayor struggled with mental illness. It came to a head about 2 decades ago. He'd been a lawyer, but he lost his license after a series of ethics violations. And then his wife died in 2008. And later, he lost his home.
Kind of in the mid-2000s, Craig had stated publicly after he'd been disciplined by the Oregon Supreme Court that he had been struggling with mental illness, including he'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he had been self-medicating with alcohol. He struggled with substance abuse a lot throughout his life, and this is according to his family members, his friends, his colleagues, all of whom I interviewed for this story, as well as his daughter. So he proceeded to, he had his license suspended by the Oregon State Bar. He never had it reinstated. And then he, around the housing market crash, was trying to fight for other people who were losing their homes at that time. And at that exact same time, he was actually struggling to pay his own bills. And over the next, about the next, a little bit less than a decade, he fought a mortgage company trying to keep that home, and he ultimately he lost. So it was kind of the culmination of several different struggles that he'd been experiencing for a lot of his life. And while he was experiencing homelessness at the end of his life, a lot of his family members, they didn't really know where he was. He'd kind of drifted out of their lives.
In January, Coiner was taken to the hospital. He had frostbite, he had a toe amputated, and then he died of a stroke while he was going through severe alcohol withdrawal. His family says they had tried to find him over the years, as you heard there, but they didn't have a lot of success. Regardless, they think his story does deserve to be told.
They really believe that he deserves to be remembered. He was an extremely flawed man. He was very, very complicated. He was arrested many times. He was disciplined by the bar many times. He drifted or pushed away the people who loved him, including his children. And he did live, according to his sister, with regret because of some of the mistakes that he'd made, most notably that he wasn't really in his children's life. But at the same time, at least one of his daughters, had some time at the end of his life to be there with him and to try and kind of understand him.
Dole says he's gotten a lot of feedback from the story. You can understand that. It comes from people who understand the same struggle of losing a family member or a friend this way.
A lot of people who read this story reached out to me saying that it was very similar to what happened to their loved one, whether their loved one experiences mental illness, struggles with substance abuse, experiences homelessness. It was relatable to people, but I think the big overarching theme that I heard from a lot of people was that this story shows that something like this can happen to anybody. A lot of people look at people experiencing homelessness and think that it's just, their decision, and that the person screwed up somehow, and that it's just and while I think Mr. Coiner did make a lot of mistakes in his life, I think a lot of tragedy also happened to him. And I mean, his life was the result of many tragic circumstances as well.
You can read the entire piece now in the Bend Bulletin. We have a link to it on our social media. You may need to disable your ad blocker. I discovered that. And tonight at the City Council meeting in Bend, the current mayor, Melanie Keblar, is making a statement in remembrance of the former mayor. Up next on The Story, a bill in the Oregon legislature would give homeless people $1,000 a month for 2 years to help them get back on their feet.
I'd be able to have food, water, shelter, be able to get a full job.
But as you might imagine, the idea is not popular with everyone.
The old me would have said, no way, it's BS.
So where do things stand right now? And does the measure even stand a chance? That's coming up next when The Story returns. All right, now let's talk about a piece of legislation in Salem that has a whole lot of you reacting online. There's a bill in its early stages that would give monthly $1,000 payments to qualifying homeless people or those at risk of homelessness over the course of 2 years. Now, the story makes quite a headline, I know, but the exact details on how the money would be distributed and exactly to who and how it would be tracked, all that sort of stuff, has not been ironed out yet, so relax for a minute. But the fact that the bill has even been introduced does give us a glimpse of what it could do. Blair Best has our story.
Senate Bill 603 was all the talk on this corner of Old Town Wednesday morning.
I actually think it's actually a very good idea. I really do.
It would help a lot. I'd be off the streets.
The bill in question, the People's Housing Assistance Fund demonstration program, where for 2 years, monthly $1,000 payments would go out to people living on the streets, those at risk of becoming homeless, those who make less than 60% of the area median income, or spend more than half their monthly income on rent. It's a glimpse of hope for people like Elena Archer.
I'm currently living in a tent.
Right now, she gets $600 a month.
I'm on disability, and the $600 a month doesn't really cover much of anything. I mean, with the rent and prices of food and everything else, it's just really hard to survive out here.
As of right now, what do you spend that $600 a month on?
We try and get food, we try and get blankets and everything to keep us warm out here. The necessities, the phone bill that we have.
I'd be able to have food, water, shelter, be able to get a full job.
The monthly payments would have to be used for things like rent, food, and emergency expenses. A group at Portland State University will be doing research on the project. Now we asked them, will this money be handed out as cash or vouchers? How will it be tracked? How will someone living on the streets with little resources get access to it? They tell us since it's so early on in the process, I mean, there's only been one hearing on the bill so far, that those details haven't been worked out yet.
The old me would have said, no way, it's BS.
Longtime Portlanders who are fed up with the government's response to this crisis are cautiously optimistic.
I don't see the need for another levy or tax to impose upon ourselves. I think the money's there. They just got to control how, monitor how it's spent and how it's, that it's really helping people.
Do you have faith that our local government will keep their promise on doing something like this?
Not a whole lot, no. So they haven't proved a lot to me.
I really wish we could elect smart people who can really get things done without, bureaucratic messes.
Blair Best, KGW News.
The bill's chief sponsor is a Democrat representing the Aloha area. This is certainly something we're going to keep an eye on. And we know that many of you are not hearing about this for the first time today. Word is spreading online and on the streets.
All right, so to my surprise, we showed up here in Old Town and we're outside Street Roots where a lot of homeless people gather every morning. They get their coffee, they get their newspapers to go out and sell. Anyways, we showed up and I just started telling them about this, the talk of the proposed $1,000 payments, and they all finished my sentences and they were like, yeah, we think that's a great idea. We just read about it yesterday, and they were all on board. And, a lot of people said that this money would really fill the gap for them and help them reach sobriety or stay sober and find housing, which they all agreed was the number one thing. They said living in a tent or a trailer and, worrying if your stuff's going to get stolen, as we all know and as we've reported many times, just isn't sustainable. So they said this $1,000 would be the difference. All right, so we just drove to Northwest 23rd to try and talk with other people who aren't experiencing homelessness about this proposal. And some people who didn't want to go on camera, but they shared with us that they think it's a bad idea to give this type of money to people living on the streets. They were like, oh no, don't give them $1,000. They're just going to use it on drugs. Which is in direct contrast from what we heard from the people in Old Town who say this money will actually help them reach sobriety. So it's sort of interesting. You just drive a few blocks and people think totally different things.
Yep, interesting, Blair. And I guess it's a difference of the people who are getting the money or the people who would be watching the money go out. But here's my opinion on all this. When I first heard about Blair's story there, I got to tell you, I really thought it was a wingnut idea that wouldn't stand a chance in the legislature, and I'm still not convinced that it's a good idea or that it will work. And the people I talked with inside the legislature, by the way, they're not sure it's going to pass. But I have to admit, it's not coming out of the blue. There is, it turns out, a movement across the country to give folks a guaranteed income like that. Tacoma, to our north, ran a pilot project last year with 110 low-income people. They were given $500 a month for a year, but here's a big difference. They were all employed and they were all the head of a household. The final report on the thing that went out for, won't be out for another year, even though the program ended in November. Not sure what's up with that, but early reporting by publications like U.S. News and World Report suggests the program was quite successful. Still, in my opinion, there is a big difference between giving hardworking, low-income people some extra help as opposed to someone who is living on the streets, many of whom are dealing with mental health problems and drug addiction. I think giving them $1,000 a month for 2 years, in my opinion, terrible idea. But that's just me. You don't have to agree with me. Let me know what you think. Send us an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Coming up next on The Story, many crabbers along the coast are having to improvise to make ends meet because some of the crab seasons were delayed or even canceled in recent months. And some say the future of crabbing is at risk because of things like climate change. More on what's being called a crabbing catastrophe when The Story returns. Do you have a Roku or Amazon Fire? If you do, you can watch today's show plus previous shows and segments anytime on our streaming service. You ought to give it a try. Go to your Roku or Fire homepage and add KGW Plus to your home screen. And then let us know what you think. Moving on to crabbing, a catastrophe is hitting Pacific Northwest crabbers. You might remember in October, conservation concerns sparked the closure of the Bering Sea snow crab harvest that halted an industry that normally brings in hundreds of millions of dollars. Climate-related concerns are stopping more and more of these seasons now. Erica Zuko from our sister station in Seattle reports on growing calls to take action now because some say a way of life for generations is at risk.
So we have 3 orders of the jumbo snow crab.
The work it takes to bring these crabs to your plate boils down to the sweat of fishermen braving dangerous seas. Hard work Mark Casto wouldn't have any other way.
As a little kid, I'd Used to go up and I just loved it. It was got in my blood and it was just been a way of life for me.
Casto and his shipmates have shared a deck for decades. They're all now feeling the pinch thanks to 2 big closures of lucrative catches.
Kind of seen it coming, but I mean, it was definitely a shocker. It was like, it's the first time in the fishery's history that's been closed. I don't think anybody was really prepared for it.
Casto's crew is making do, some tendering cod, some fishing a little Dungeness, but it doesn't compare to the work that's fed his family for decades.
Put the line in here.
Recently retired crab skipper Lance Farr worries future generations won't have the option.
Not all the boats are going to make it through this. It's going to be a financial disaster.
Noah says Red King crab was closed in Bristol Bay after a years-long decline, propelled in part by climate change. But snow crab closure in the Bering Sea was more of a shock. Noah citing the aftermath of the 2019 heat wave known as the blob.
And it's a trickle-down effect. It's just hitting everybody from the bait people to the shipyard people.
The Alaska Bering Sea Crabbers Association says it's grateful for an emergency declaration to help cover costs crabbers suffered this season, a price tag that nears $300 million. But this could only be the beginning.
Climate change is real, and we're kind of canary in the coal mine. We just need to be thinking about that, the ways that we can make our fisheries climate ready.
Farr says one leg of the solution is research, but there are also questions about other types of fishing, such as trawling, which drags nets on the ocean floor and may impact habitats.
We need, all the fisheries to work together and, come together and figure out what the future looks like and how we can all, maintain our businesses and work together.
They're asking anyone who wants a lifeblood of the Pacific Northwest to stay pumping to keep attention to the cause.
We need to look to the future and come up with some better science and figure out a way to survive through these down times.
A way to prevent these crab pots from sitting empty.
That is a huge issue. All right, keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this. The KGW Great Food Drive is here. Last year, as many as 1 in 8 Oregonians sought food assistance. This year, our goal is to provide 1.2 million meals of food. The best way you can help is to give online at kgw.com/food drive. We want to thank local Toyota dealers, Rivermark Credit Union, and Safeway for supporting this year's food drive. Well, that's the end of the show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our story, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow night.